This video is part 2 of the NieR Reincarnation storyline, so if you haven't seen part 1 yet, you might want to bookmark this and come back, or else you'll probably be pretty confused. Link to that video is in the description and should be popping up in the corner right about now. To those who left, welcome back and let's jump into it. When I released the first NieR Reincarnation video, at the time only 9 chapters had been released, and the game had yet to get its English release. However, since then more content has come out, so what do you say we take a dive into what's happened in the last several months? For starters, in my previous Reincarnation video, I referred to this character as Frunlease, which was her name in the Japanese version. The localization pulled a Joey Wheeler and changed her name to Gale, so whenever I say Gale, she's who I'm referring to. They also made Leon's name Rion, which isn't technically wrong, but it's a bit literal of a translation. Anyway, with those disclaimers, on to the actual story now. For chapter 10, we begin as usual with Fio coming to Lavania's world and heading into one of the scarecrows. The memory within this scarecrow is of a military captain named Griff. The captain has a reputation for being timid, and his propensity to retreat has earned him the nickname Captain Craven from his men. As the captain makes his rounds and prepares his men for combat, one of the soldiers reports to him that the problem child who had volunteered for combat is still unaccounted for. The problem child, of course, being Lars from the previous memory. With this, the memory ends, and Fio and Lavania travel to the next scarecrow. On the way, Fio muses about memories of wars, and Lavania notes that Fio always seems to be having fun in the cage, unlike her life in the waking world. Lavania then thinks that he would like to be human as well, to see the world from her perspective. As they arrive at the scarecrow, they see a young boy crying for his mother. The boy says he was chased there trying to escape from soldiers. The carrier remarks that the boy must have come from inside the scarecrow, something that was supposed to be impossible. Fio wonders if Lavania might be able to somehow help the young boy within the scarecrow. So they enter the next scarecrow and the captain's story continues. The captain marches on the enemy camp with his soldiers with the goal of destroying the enemy and finding Lars. While making their way through the camp, they pass a woman who desperately calls out for her missing son before dying. After fighting through the camp, the enemy finds the enemy commander with a sword stabbed into his chest, a sword he recognizes as belonging to the missing boy. The captain laments to himself that he may have failed again, and the memory ends. Having failed to find a way to help the young boy trapped in the cage, Fio offers to the boy to bring him with them to find his mother. The carrier remarks to Lavania that the dead woman in the scarecrow who was looking for her son was the boy's mother, and wonders why Lavania does not just tell the boy the truth. Fio asks Lavania if he could continue looking in the scarecrows, to which he reluctantly agrees. The captain's memory continues. Years ago, when he was still just a foot soldier, he was arrogant and brash and hated to follow the orders of his commanding officers. After one particular battle, he searched for survivors, and all he could find were the bodies of his squad mates. Their deaths had been his fault, as he had chosen to disobey orders. He found one of his commanders still alive, one that he had often been in conflict with. However, with his dying breath, the commander said that it was good to see him alive, and that he was glad he had survived. Back at the captain's present, he continued looking for Lars. He finds him wounded, hiding behind a pile of rubble, and remarks to himself that he must do whatever it takes to save him, to atone for the mistakes he'd made in the past. Back outside the scarecrow, Lavania tells Fio that he was still unable to find the boy's mother. The boy then says that he will stay there and wait for her, because otherwise she may never find him. Fio and Lavania accept this and move on, while the carrier remarks to Lavania that he was unable to tell the boy the truth in the end. To which Lavania replies that he has no interest in making a child cry. Along the way to the next scarecrow, Fio begins to show signs that she is tired and out of breath. Lavania becomes concerned and wonders if this is because he is consuming her dreams. But the carrier assures him that consuming dreams has no physical effect on a person. Within the captain's final memory, he hauls Lars onto his back and begins carrying him to safety, all the while still issuing orders to his men, determined to see every last one of them return safely. Lars regains consciousness and apologizes to the captain, admitting he was reckless. The captain then encounters an enemy soldier, and although he manages to kill him, he receives a terrible wound in return. Pushing onward through the pain, the captain continues to carry Lars towards safety. As the captain reaches his limit, a squad of enemy soldiers appears, far more than he could hope to fend off. However, the captain's squad appears to back him up, and the enemy retreats rather than engage in a two-way slaughter. The captain then collapses to the ground, relieved his men had all survived, and he spoke the same words to Lars that his commander had told him, "I'm glad you survived." With the final scarecrow cleansed, Lavanya consumes Fio's dream. After having her dream consumed, Fio seems reluctant to go back, to which Lavanya notes that she's acting strange, but Fio insists she's fine and returns to her world. After her departure, the carrier remarks that something in Fio's world seems to be causing her to weaken. Chapter 11 opens with the familiar formula. Fio returns to the cage once more and sets out with Lavanya to the Dark Scarecrows. In this memory, a girl awakens out of stasis in an abandoned laboratory with no memories. She hears a faint scream and feels compelled to head toward it. Along the path, she finds a crystal in the shape of a person. She reaches her hand out toward it, and memories of the crystal flood into her mind. From these memories, she realized that it is not a crystal, but the body of a girl much like her, and that she was created to be a weapon. Down the hallway, she finds a report indicating that this was part of a project for mass-producing weaponized clones, which was halted after the production of Unit 123. A strange ethereal creature then appears before her, and her eyes glow red before she dispatches the creature with the skill of someone experienced in combat, not someone who had just come out of stasis. She continues into the darkness, compelled to move forward. The memory ends here, and Fio and Lavanya move onward to the next scarecrow. However, when they arrive at the scarecrow, it runs away from them. Once again, something the carrier says should be impossible. Eventually, they catch the scarecrow, and Lavanya enters the next memory. The girl continues through the laboratory and comes across a room full of living plants. At the sight of the plants, the girl is beset upon by a horrible headache and flashes of memories, but they pass as quickly as they came. Deeper in the lab, the girl comes across another project report. This one describes how Specimen 31 was shown a specific image before being euthanized, and then Specimens 33, 34, and 35 were made to recover the memories from her body at separate intervals, before being asked what image was shown to 31. 33 recovered the memories one day after death and was able to answer correctly. 34 recovered the memories 2 days after death and was able to answer partially correctly. And 35 recovered the memories 4 days after death and was unable to answer. The girl moves onward and finds another crystallized body that she absorbs memories from. The images she sees are of her fellow sisters being overrun by hordes of enemies that overwhelmed the lab. Back outside in the cage, Fio seems once again to be exhausted, to which Lavanya suggests that she rests, but Fio insists that she's fine. However, as they head to the next scarecrow, Lavanya stops along the way and tells Fio to rest. While resting, she asks Lavanya if he will still be her friend when he becomes human, but he dodges the question. After Fio is rested, they head to the next scarecrow. The memory continues. The girl heads deeper into the lab when suddenly the building shakes with a roar. Before finding the source, she reaches an impassable door and heads underground to search for a key. She finds more documents detailing the sickening outcome of the experiments on the other living weapons, and then recovers a memory of the first of the subjects. The first sister had lost control and was responsible for birthing the apparitions that overwhelmed the lab. She also sees a brief flash of a cabin in the woods in the memory, but this goes as quickly as it comes. She grabs the key and continues on. Outside the scarecrow, Lavanya remarks that something seems wrong, and that Carrie explains to him that he must be close to consuming enough dreams to become human. Fio congratulates him and says she's happy for him. This perplexes Lavanya, who wonders how someone could be happy about someone else achieving their dream. In the next scarecrow, the girl arrives at the source of the noise, the giant leader of the apparitions, the first sister who had lost control. She defeats the monster, which briefly turns back to her original form, before turning to crystal like the rest of the sisters, dying as a person, perhaps her one small comfort. The girl then examines the memories of the first sister. She sees the cabin once more, this time clear enough to see that it is the house Gale and her younger sister lived in. She understands that this is where she must go. She heads up the elevator and arrives at a ruined city, where the memory ends. In her character's story, she states that she sees no humans around, only machines in the city. If city ruins filled with machines sounds familiar to you, she also has an obtainable item that has this image of her encountering a stubby from Automata. But I'll get more into this in the analysis portion later in the video. Back in the cage, Lavanya consumes Fio's dream, and she heads back to her world once more. As she leaves, Lavanya tells Fio that she should stay, since she acts stranger every time she comes back. Fio denies the request, saying her mother might be waiting. The next night, Fio doesn't show up in the cage. However, the carrier explains that the final step to becoming human is to restore the scarecrows with Fio's memories of the other world. So, Lavanya heads to the first scarecrow alone and enters the memory. Fio is from a poor and broken family. Her parents argue every day, which she leaves home to avoid. Her country has a strict hierarchy of nobles, commoners, and below them, the goat people. A class which exists solely to give commoners someone to look down on. Fio is one of these goat people, and her father lost his job when it was claimed by a commoner. Fio was constantly berated and insulted by the commoners of the town who saw her as less than human, with her shackles a clear indicator of her status. One day, Fio heads into the nobles' assembly hall to ask for her father's job back. Naturally, the nobles refuse and kick her out. Outside the scarecrow, Lavanya vows to kill everyone who has caused Fio pain. Without Fio there, Lavanya realized that he was fond of collecting dreams with her, and wonders if she was alright, or if she needed help in her world. In the next memory, Fio's father heads to the barracks to ask for his job back as a town guard, and doesn't return. So a worried Fio goes to the barracks as well. Inside, she finds him beaten by his former friends and co-workers. When he collapses to the ground, Fio runs over to him, but realizes that he's no longer breathing. Knowing she might be next, Fio runs home to tell her mother what happened. In the house, Fio sees her mother with a strange man, and when she tearfully tells him what happened at the barracks, her mother laughs and says that saves her the trouble. The next morning, Fio wakes up to find that she's alone, her mother having run off with a stranger. Fio wanders the town, knowing that there's no one left who will help her. However, she does not realize the implication of this. Having not eaten for a day, she steals an apple from a vendor. The vendor notices and goes to stop her, but when she collapses in front of him, he dismissively says she might as well take it if she was really that hungry, before stomping on the apple. While on the ground, Fio sees one of her old friends, who ignores her, saying she doesn't know any goats. It finally hits Fio how alone she is, now that even her friends are gone due to her status. Back in the cage, Lavanya realizes that he wants to be Fio's friend once she becomes human. He asks the carrier if he would be able to head to Fio's world to help her as soon as he became human, but the carrier says he would have to run the request by management first. Regardless, Lavanya hurries to the next and final scarecrow. In the memory, the miserable Fio tries in vain to stop officials from destroying her house. She wanders off into the night with nothing but her clothes and her ever-present shackles. Her path takes her to an old ruin where she used to play. As she walks, she ponders the injustice in the world, and the schadenfreude of the commoners who look down on her. In the ruins, she sees her friend, father, and mother as ghostly figures who abandon her as she collapses. Nothing but her nightmares to accompany her. Back in the cage, the carrier pulls an unconscious Fio in, and Lavanya desperately consumes her dream. With all the prerequisites met, Lavanya finally becomes human. However, as we know from part 1, what actually happens is that Fio and Lavanya swap forms. Fio runs away terrified, and Lavanya angrily accuses the carrier of lying to him. But the carrier claims he never technically lied. Lavanya and the carrier fight, during which the carrier says he has orders from an absolute being to meddle in this world, and that Lavanya's imperfections were taken advantage of. Lavanya manages to defeat the carrier, after which Mama appears. Lavanya is apprehensive, given that Mama has a similar appearance to the carrier, but Mama says she can fix the situation, to which Lavanya agrees. Mama tells him he must become stronger by collecting more dreams, and also that he will lose everything. His voice, his senses, even his memory. As we know, he goes through with it, and with this, we return to the present, where Lavanya has collected all the memories from part 1 and has atoned for his sin. Lavanya approaches Fio with the power of the collected dreams, but she cries out that she does not want to become human again, not wanting to return to the pain of her time as a human, and she attacks Lavanya. Determined to save her, Lavanya incapacitates her and returns her form. Back in human form again, Fio seems to have no recollection of her time as a monster. She asks Lavanya if he failed at becoming human, but he assures her he doesn't mind. The two promise to play together again someday, before they disappear into light, leaving weapons in their place. Mama states that their memories have been restored, and takes the weapons to a doppelganger of herself. The two muse that Fio and Lavanya's memories were so broken that it was a close call on restoring them, but the two should be able to sleep peacefully now. Yet the work is not done, and they must gather the rest of the stories. A legion of lookalikes of the carrier and Mama appear around them, before they head into the distance. With that, we end the story of Fio and Lavanya. However, the story of NieR Reincarnation continues in the Tale of the Sun and Moon, which I think I'll cover at a later point. So, how does reincarnation fit in with the rest of the series? None of the new chapters give a truly definitive answer, but that's nothing new, is it? We know from interviews that the game does take place in the same world as Replicant and Automata. Now, from the memories of Noelle the Living Weapon, we see the stubby machines from Automata. So assuming there's no timey-wimey nonsense with memories from the future, then it takes place at some point after the alien invasion on the timeline, which occurs in 5012. If we go with the theory that the cage is the humanity servers on the moon, the earliest it could be is around 5100 when the androids created the server. The other likely possibility is that it's the arc from the end of Automata, which would place it after 11950. Both dates place this as occurring after the extinction of humanity, making Noelle the only human on Earth when she comes to the surface, even if she is a clone. As for when the memories with various other characters occur, this is tricky as well. The first confirmed date we have of androids like Deimos existing is 2032. A time period which would mean Gale, her sister, and Leon are all replicants. Gale's sister being a replicant who's experimented on by other replicants seems a bit odd though, as we don't really see them use advanced technology or experiment much anywhere else. The wasteland, Leon's kingdom, and the lab all seem a bit incongruous, but I'm not sure how they could align any time that isn't post-Project Gestalt. Anyway, that'll do it for this video. If you've got any theories or things you'd like to add, just leave them in the comments below. I'll definitely make a part 3 when more chapters are released, and in the meantime probably cover some of the novels and maybe spice it up with some Final Fantasy. I'll also be doing a lore-focused playthrough of Ender Lilies live on this channel in the near future, so feel free to pop into chat and say hi. So subscribe if any of those sound interesting so you don't miss them, and I'll see you soon.